Lies of P has several player mechanics you can customize and build for yourself for a unique playstyle. Among them are the Legion arms, very similar to Sekiro prosthetic arms, but on a first playthrough, which one should you really choose? Hey everyone, it's Hazmy here, and in this video I'll try to share my experience and opinion on which are the best Legion arms you should choose in all the different builds, whether you will go for strength, dexterity or advance, the magic of the game. I have thoroughly tested all of the Legion arms on my first playthrough and have a fairly strong opinion on them, but keep in mind in the end, these are just that, my opinions, and I still prefer role-playing and having fun with versatile builds than just going for the best. Now the way I compare the Legion arms of Lies of P is mostly based on their usefulness, how much they can help in fights, and the most annoying situations you can find yourself in, such as mini-bosses, arguably one of the toughest scenarios you'll encounter. And also I'm looking at their versatility, in how easy it is to use them or in how many situations they actually are useful, since not all Legion arms are good in every situation, and sometimes you just have to switch them. This is also one of the weaker points of the game so far at the first glance in my first playthrough, that I feel the Legion arms aren't that balanced overall, and I think there are just clear winners for which are the best, and others are either behind in damage or are just really hard to use them to the very aggressive enemies or short range. Now to not waste your time, let's start with the best Legion arms in my experience, and then I'll also discuss the rest of them for those who are interested. After thorough testing with 3 different builds, one for motivity, advance and technique, I have narrowed the list down to 3 Legion arms that I think are the best to level up on a first playthrough: the Aegis Shield Legion arm, Fulminis the Lightning arm, and the clear winner being, surprisingly, the puppet string you can get at the start. The reason these 3 are the best in my opinion is that both the Fulminis and the puppet string are absolutely amazing at disabling enemies or knocking them off balance, that allows you to dish out some quick attacks while also having their own very respectable damage, and later on, once they are leveled, they also almost always stagger enemies, opening them up for fatal attacks, which are going to be the bread and butter for the game to deal with elites. And then there's the Aegis, the shield, which just allows you so much survivability that it deserves to be in the top 3. Puppet String is the Legion arm you'll get for the first time, and it's immediately going to be extremely useful to pull enemies to you from really bad or annoying placement, especially for ranged enemies. But since the pull also interrupts most normal enemies, it's also great to interrupt them, but admittedly, the beginning isn't where Puppet String shines, but only later once you're able to get all the upgrades for it, especially Attack Link. Once you unlock Attack Link around halfway in the game, this Legion arm becomes absolutely broken. Attack Link is basically the equivalent of a fully charged heavy attack, but from the safety of jumping up in the air after an initial quick grapple, which in the case of normal enemies will completely stun them, and with elites it triggers an attack, but since you jump into the air, you basically almost immediately dodge it and land your super attack. This attack is an incredibly powerful staggering tool. Like I said, it almost always staggers enemies if you use it well, and since you can initiate it from range and it's pretty fast, it's a completely safe move that you can use as long as you have Legion charge, but that can be recharged anytime. The second reason this is so powerful is that not only has its own damage, but it also applies your weapon attack and its scaling from what I see, so it works with all builds despite the low scaling with advance, as if you use a fire weapon or electric weapon, it will also transfer over into your attack link, and essentially you're double dipping your damage into 2 sources. It is so powerful that even with full damage builds, it sadly overpowers the other Legion arms according to my tests, which should be stronger considering a lot of them are harder to use and they also don't have the luxury of adding your weapon damage, so that's why I'm a bit sad about the Legion arms balance a bit. Moving on to the second best Legion arm for me, the Fulminis. This is also an early arm you'll get, and its strengths are quite similar to the Puppet String, but it's less dependent on your weapon and it's more of a timing arm. Despite the Fulminis being a lightning attack, I would still recommend to use it against all enemy types, as the main benefit of using it isn't always the damage, though it's really powerful against puppets, but the main thing is the amount of stagger it applies to enemies. Even a no-charge tap attack will often knock enemies back, but if you decide to level it up later, a level 3 charge can knock down even elite units, which is a huge deal for dealing bonus damage or freeing up some space, since the game is very fast-paced and knockdowns are your best friend. These knockdowns also usually result in staggered status, so you can go for your fatal blows. It also helps that a large portion of the game is against puppets or enemies with lightning weakness, so you don't have to worry too much about it being weak or wasting resources on it, since it will be very useful throughout the game, and like I said, it's still very powerful against non-puppet monsters too. The only downside of the Fulminis is that it does not scale well with technique, so I recommend it mostly for motivity and advanced builds from the start, and use it on level 1 while leveling up your puppet string, which will get better later. And my last recommendation for best Legion arm is the Aegis shield. Yes, probably a favorite for many since it allows you to have the traditional Souls-like experience having a shield. For this reason alone, the Aegis is placed high since even if you're weak, a leveled up Aegis can attack even while blocking, and you can just chip down elites really slowly if that's the playstyle you prefer. And considering how safe it is, it can't be a low-ranking Legion arm, it's just too useful. The Aegis also has an on-demand parry that has the same explosion as your block but has no cooldown. So if you're one of those parry gods, then this is also a great choice for you as you'll get a lot of use out of it, not to mention having a free parry instead of having to use a weapon handle for it. For damage, while the Aegis isn't weak, I wouldn't say it's anywhere near the other two. The stagger opportunities are there of course, but they can be quite hard to pull off. So again, I would say for most players, the main strength of this arm is its survivability, but even then, I tried out a full strength build with guarding, and frankly, I don't feel you need the Aegis if you want to be a tank. Just build for motivity and use a two-hander, then using puppet string will still be more useful than fully turtling with the Aegis. Then after the first 3 Legion arms, which I would place much higher compared to the rest, next would be the Flamberge Flamethrower and the Pandemonium. So they are your elemental variations instead of Fulminis, and they are fairly strong if you build them for advance, but like most things in the game, they start to fall short in practical combat since they are either too slow, too low range, or just situational. I actually use the Flamethrower a lot in a certain zone, but then I realized the main benefit of the Flamethrower is setting enemies on fire, which I could do with my weapon anyway, after which I just found no real use for the Flamberge, especially with its very short range that generally gets interrupted before it can fire off its main explosion, which is strong, yes, but you'll not be able to use it most of the time, so I wish it was even longer range than what the upgrade gives it, since the game is just way too fast-paced for this Legion arm. Then the Pandemonium, I actually had a lot more success with, as you can spray your acid charge on the ground, and even if you miss your enemies with it, you can kite them back into it where you just hold your ground, and if they actually stay in the acid all the time, it's really good damage along with the final explosion. So yes, this one is relatively speaking more reliable than the Flamberge, but still its damage was nowhere near the other ones, while having a lot more technicality and zoning, so it just got annoying to use frankly, but I can see it being fun for general exploration. You can see I mainly rank my arms based on tough fights, mini bosses and bosses, so if you generally need more help with just the normal zones, you might have more success with these. Then finally we have the Deus Ex Machina and Falconize, and I hope it's just me and someone will find a build for them, but I tried them with full damage for their respective stats, and I just found them extremely underwhelming, which was especially disappointing since I was looking forward to the Falconize the most. Now both of them can deal a decent amount of damage, but still unfortunately much lower, almost half as much as my puppet string did with the same build, while costing almost the same Legion charge and nowhere near as good stagger, or almost none at all in the case of the Deus Ex Mines. These 2 Legion arms are supposed to be the main damage dealers in my opinion, considering they don't bring any major mobility, bonus element, or other utility at all, only their damage, and frankly they don't deliver and there isn't much to say about them. Of course they aren't useless at all, and if you really like them, go for it and have fun, but when it comes to observing the balance between the Legion arms, sadly these 2 seem to fall really short compared to the others, and I hope they will patch them or update them in the future. So without wasting any more of your time or over explaining things, this is pretty much my experience with using all of the Legion arms and testing them out in various scenarios, and why I think the Puppet String and Fulminis are the best. They just deal more damage, they're easier to use, and have the best stagger power among all of them, which is basically what you want the most for dealing with elite monsters. In the end, I will most likely have a playthrough with all of them since I love the game. It's just too much fun despite some of the critical mistakes I think they did with the combat, but the world and the atmosphere is just too much fun to miss out on. Anyhow, hopefully this video helped you prepare for the first playthrough and which Legion arms to choose or play with. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe as I'll be posting more Lies of P content in the near future. Take care everyone, and I'll see you the next time.